Well, hello, I'm Kristie Reynolds, and I sit on the Library of Michigan Foundation Board, and I'm also on the Notable Books Committee. And I'm here to interview Erin Bartels. And this is her third win for the Notable Books. How exciting. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. Erin, did you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, I would love to. I am a not quite lifelong Michigander. I was born in Ohio, which wasn't my fault, but I've lived here since I was three. And I work for a company in Grand Rapids. I live in the Lansing area. I grew up in the Bay City area. My family's from Detroit, and other family lives up north. So I like to feel like I have a little piece of me in every little part of the mitten. And this is my sixth book that we'll be talking about today. So I've been writing novels for a little while now, but I also work full time for a publisher, doing writing work for them, copywriting, things like that. So I've been very involved with publishing books since, gosh, I guess I started working for them when I was 23. So it's been nearly a quarter of a century
Wow.
that I've been involved in publishing, although only the last 5 or 6 years as an author.
Okay. Okay. Wow, that's amazing to be in one position for that long.
Oh,
I
sure,
mean, yeah.
it is.
So, how did you become a writer?
Oh, let's see. It's it's a little muddy because, of course, I've been involved in books for so long. When you write, like, when do you become a writer? When you get published? No. So I don't really remember a time when I wasn't writing quite a bit. Probably if you want to talk about when I got serious about writing, I would say it was when I quit grad school to write. So I had about a year and a half of graduate school and realized that that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. So I decided what I really wanted to do was write books, not just work on other people's books. And
Okay.
so I think that was probably around 2007, 2008. And then I had a son in 2008. And so then you have a kid and you've got all the extra stuff. So, but I really did get a lot of writing done when he was little. So I started working on what became my debut novel, I think, in 2013, but it didn't come out until 2019. So, and I was writing before that too. There was a novel before that. So it time to get from the point where I started writing my own fiction to the point when it was actually on a shelf. And there were lots of points along the way that, you can decide, oh, this isn't working, this is taking too long, I'm, not happy with this. And a lot of people quit. And so I always want to encourage writers, if there's any writers watching this, to not quit because you can't succeed if you quit. So there's always times when you feel like it's not going well and it's working past those that gets you to the point where you want to be.
All right. Yeah, exactly. So, um, I wonder what it was like to have some of those times when you struggled. Was it um, hard, or how did you get past it?
I think that there were definitely moments when it was discouraging. So I had a book that I had finished and I thought, oh, this is ready to look for an agent. And so I looked for an agent for quite some time for that book. I mean, I think there were more than 100 that I queried.
Oh,
And a lot
wow.
of people loved the writing, but it wasn't quite there because I was a good writer. I just didn't know how to. A novel's a long piece of fiction, and it is
Hmm.
something you have to learn, even if you're a good writer. So I was encouraged by my rejections and kept working and didn't just keep working on that book. I started with a new idea. And I never didn't believe that eventually I would have something published. So there was that sort of underlying belief in myself, which I credit to my parents and my teachers. And, I never had one of those sad, discouraging stories about how a teacher or a coach was just like, why are you bothering? Or anything like that. I was always surrounded by encouraging people. And that really, really helps.
That's good to know. I agree. You've got to have that tribe, right? Um, so why do you write? Y-
Oh, why do I write? Um, I think that I write because I have a lot of thoughts about things, and a lot of people who write, I think better through writing. And in order to really decide how you feel about something, you almost have to write through it. So a lot of my books will have kind of bigger questions. Why do people suffer? Why did this happen to me? How do you move forward when everything's broken? All of those sorts of things. You can't change the past, so what are you going to do with the life in front of you? These kind of big questions, and I enjoy putting those in the context of a story rather than an argument or an essay or something like that. And I don't know, I just keep having ideas and so they feel like they want to be written, and that's kind of why I write. And I really do enjoy the process of sharing what I wrote with
Mm-hmm.
readers. That can be scary for writers at first because they aren't sure how things are going to be received, or if they're going to be, they're going to be badly reviewed or whatever. But I really enjoy, because I was such a big reader and
Mm-hmm.
appreciated being on that side of things, where, gosh, what this person thought, even if they're long dead, I can actually commune with this person in some way. I can be of the same mind and the same heart with this person, and they get me. And so I think being a writer for me is a way of being involved in humanity.
Yeah, I will say I've really, really enjoyed the parts of your books where it's like, oh, this is a deeper question. We really need to
Mm,
think. And there were several times where I did stop and think. And in fact, once I finished your book, I was like still thinking about it.
that's
And
so good to hear.
the yeah, yeah. So I think you're hitting your mark. How's that?
Good. That's good to know.
So it's asking what is your writing process? But I wonder, do you write by yourself or do you write in a group or
Yeah, I tend to be sort of solo. I don't like sharing things that are in progress because I
Mhm.
don't I'm not really looking for people to tell me, well, where do you think this should go? So I really like getting feedback, very specific feedback for specific reasons from people. So for instance, the book we're talking about today, The Lady with the Dark Hair, it involves art and history and women and family relationships and things like that. So, if I were looking for a reader for that, I'd look specifically for somebody who maybe knew about those things, or had experience with, let's say, one of the elements in the story is that one of the characters' mothers is schizophrenic. And so I needed somebody who had experience with that to read that and make sure that I was getting it right. But generally, along the way of writing the story, I'm not looking for, what do you think I should do next? And so I write alone, but publishing is a very communal process. You need
Okay.
you need support, whether you're self-publishing or traditionally publishing. You need somebody else to edit. You need somebody else to give you feedback. You need somebody else who knows about design to do your cover. But even when you are self-publishing, you want to get that feedback from people. Not that you're going to change a bunch of stuff to fit their expectations, but you don't want to be really wrong about something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
along the way, when you do have problems, it's really important to have the support of other writers. So I'm involved in a couple of writing groups. So I'm involved in the Women's Fiction Writers Association, which is a international group, really, that I've really benefited, even just from having somebody to complain to, when things aren't going well. And then I've been involved in more local groups, like I've taught at the Rally of Writers in Lansing and some other conferences around Michigan. And for a while, I was part of the Capital City Writers Association when that was going on. And I really enjoy connecting with people about writing. I'm just not usually sharing like early drafts, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. So, um, how do you kind of describe this work of fiction that we're talking about?
Yeah, so the lady with the dark hair, which is somewhere over there she is, over my
Perfect, yes.
shoulder. It's like, I'm going to put some books up here because I'll refer to them and then they're there. Um, So it's a dual timeline story. There is a historical timeline that starts in 1879. It starts in southern France, but it kind of takes you around to a few different places: Paris, northern Africa, and Gibraltar, and even across the sea. And then there's the modern timeline, which actually takes place in East Lansing, because I lived in Lansing for 18 years on the east side, and so I was always in East Lansing. And there was so much research to do for the historical timeline. I was like, I'm putting this thing someplace I know. I don't have to research these places because this is where I go for tacos or whatever. And that timeline is about a woman who is part of a very small family that has a museum dedicated to the work of an artist who lived during the Impressionist era, which would be the late 1800s. And they have this very small museum. Nobody really knows much about her ancestor. He's not a very celebrated artist. He's not a real artist. He's fictional. And then the past timeline is the story of that person and another person, a woman named Viviana, who is she's Catalonian. She is in France under an assumed name. She's hiding from authorities in Spain for various reasons, which I won't spoil. And she ends up meeting up with this person who is the ancestor in the other timeline. So the two stories cross paths a lot, and they deal
Mhm.
with issues of um, well, in the past, there were very specific external restrictions put on women, and especially women artists. And then they're sort of contrasted with those internal restrictions we put on ourselves in the modern day, where, we don't have to have a chaperone to go places. We're allowed to wear pants, all of these sorts of things. We can be educated the same as men, but that doesn't mean there are not restrictions on people's lives. And a lot of the ones that this modern day character Esther experiences, she'll have to grapple with, like, are these truly things that I can't do, or am I just making excuses?
Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah, so we have like a lot of art, a lot of talking about what it means to be a woman who is doing artistic work and creative work, and what is it worth, and all those sorts of things.
how did you choose the Impressionist era for your painting?
Good question. So the character who is the ancestor in the one
Hmm.
timeline is his name's Francisco Vela, and I wanted him to be a merchant who sold pigments. I think that I started reading a particular book before I started writing this one, and it's one, two, three over, which you can barely see. It's called The Secret Lives of Color by Cassia St. Clair. It's a great book. It's so interesting, and it gives you all of these stories about the origins of different colors. Um, how we got a certain kind of pigment, how you got it, how they made a certain kind of paint, that sort of thing. And it intrigued me because there's so many bizarre ways that we get colors. Sometimes it's crushed up animals, sometimes it involves human urine, sometimes, it involves really dangerous substances that kill people slowly. And during the time of the Impressionists, there was a transition from being indoors to outdoors. And the thing that made that possible was actually a technological advancement in paint. So instead
Okay.
of being sold pigments that an artist would then mix themselves with oil or water or egg white in order to make a paint, you actually had, for the first time, aluminum tubes of paint. And
Oh.
that's what allowed the artists to get out of their studio
Hmm.
more easily and get out into the world and into the light, as it were. You can see a huge difference between paintings that are done in a studio where it's a little bit darker and the ones that the Impressionists did outside. And it
Hmm.
was just such a fun transitional era. And there were notable women artists at that
Okay.
time. And a few of them show up in the story, which is fun. And it was just a really interesting time to me where there were there was this feeling of possibility and freedom, but only for some people.
Yeah.
And it just made for a good backdrop, I think, for the story I wanted to tell.
Yeah. I get that. It worked well, in my
Yeah,
opinion. So,
thank you.
so what are your favorite characters? Or maybe if you have a favorite moment of the book, or
Yeah, oh, that's tough. It's one of my favorite moments for Esther, who is the main
Mhm.
character of the modern day story, is actually near the beginning. And I, it's drawn from sort of an experience in my real life where she's at a flea market and she's looking for whatever, and there's a person in front of her who is very much not dressed for a flea market, and she's very put together. She's got very carefully done hair, carefully done makeup. She's wearing these high heels in like a field, and Esther sizes her up and decides, I know exactly everything about this woman. She's going to do this with that thing that she's buying, and this is why she's doing it. And she just has all of these ideas about who this woman is. But at first, she's intimidated by this woman because she's so put together. And Esther is like, I'm at a flea market. I've got like a fanny pack, and my hair's up, and everything's going everywhere. But she's standing behind her and she's noting all of these wonderful things about this woman. And then she finds one flaw, and all she needs is that one flaw. And she just holds on to it. And I was behind a woman who was just absolutely gorgeous, totally put together at I think it was like a Michaels or something, in the
okay.
framing department. And I noticed one thing out of place, and I was just like, ah, I can relax. And it was that you could see like the white underarm stuff
Hmm.
from her deodorant on her dress. And I love that moment for Esther because I think it's really real for women that you're always kind of finding your place wherever you are. Like, okay, am I too dressed up? Am I not dressed up enough? Am I the shortest person or the tallest person in this room? Am I the heaviest person in this room? Who's more put together? Like, you're always kind of putting yourself in a particular slot, and it felt really real to me to be like, oh, thank goodness she has a flaw. So that was one of my favorite moments for her. And then I think with the storyline that happens in the 1800s with Viviana, there are so many moments that are really kind of sad for her because she has
Mhm.
a difficult background. She has no choices in life. But there are a few moments where she feels really seen by people, and those are my favorite moments for her, where she realizes someone else understands something about her, that she's not
Mhm.
completely alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. One of the scenes that comes to mind for me is when the artist recognizes her and uh, and helps her paint. And I think that is a really nice scene for her. Yeah, because you're
Yeah.
right. She does have a lot of tragedy.
Yeah, she
So,
does.
so this is your third time winning. Yay. But what does that mean to you, to have three books that you've written?
It's a lot. I feel really honored that out of six of my novels, three of them have gotten this award. It feels really wonderful to know that people, number one, are reading your work. Number two, see something worthy in it that they want to celebrate and tell others about. And that's really meaningful to me. And, all of my novels thus far have been set at least partially in Michigan. And I have such love for this state. I have for its landscape, for the way people are brought up, for the values that you hold, for how you treat other people. And I think that it's not that common to read things set in Michigan
Hmm.
when you're reading on a larger scale, maybe, people who you household names and things like that. And there's just so much cool stuff here in history, in the modern day, in all of these different types of places. And I love celebrating the kind of culture that lives up here, whether it's, in the city, in Detroit, in, the UP, everywhere in between. There's just so much humanity happening. And I really love writing books about people, interesting people. So,
Yeah, yeah. I will say I agree with you. Growing up, I did not like Michigan very well, but as I've been on the Michigan and the Notables Book Committee, I mean, learning so much about Michigan and really what an honor it is to have such a high cultural with arts,
I agree.
area. So yeah, I agree with you completely now.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So why do you think people should read your book?
Well, I think beyond it just being an interesting story, and sort of armchair travel, this one, because you get to kind of go all over the place. I think that with each of my books, I want to say something a little bit deeper than the surface narrative. And for this one, I think that I think I'd like women to read it because I think they'll identify a lot with a lot of the things that these women are grappling with. And I'd like men to read it so that they understand women better. Because
Yeah,
honestly, I think sometimes there's a little bit of bewilderment when you run into someone who you're like, why are you upset about this? And isn't that a long time ago? Didn't that, you don't have to deal with that anymore. And you're like, well, no, it's not that long
yeah, it's still
ago. And
there.
I'm still
Mhm.
dealing with it. Everything that I internalized as a kid is all still there. It's right there. And
Yeah.
I think it's just really nice for women to feel like people understand. And
Mhm.
and I what I really tried to do, and I believe I succeeded with this book, is it does not paint men as the problem. There are so
No.
many really helpful, important men in these women's lives, and I have experienced that in my life.
Hmm.
I don't I could count on one hand the number of men who were a problem for me. Know, for the most part, it's been so nice. I've had a supportive father and a supportive husband and supportive friends, and I think and teachers, and I think that rather than emphasizing, oh, well, this happened to me and this happened to us as a sex or whatever, and isn't that awful? It's nice to acknowledge the past and to move on in the future in a cooperative manner. And I
Yes,
think that
yes.
that's more um, that's more useful than just constantly deciding, well, I'm going to resist for resistance sake, and I'm going to be angry because everybody else is angry. And I really hope that women can see that there's a really positive way to deal with a lot of the problems that we see in how different genders interact with each other, and that there's a positive way forward where we're all on the same page.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I will say that was a real strength of your book. For me, were all the women relationships and how women reacted with each other, and and I've just really felt like you said, seen and heard. Yes, these are. I'm like, yeah, I totally understand this woman. So
Wonderful.
yeah, that hard work that they do, and yeah, not always getting the recognition that they need, so
Yeah.
yeah,
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 for sure.
yeah. I know I've recommended your book several times, so.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
Um, which writers or works have you found yourself reading recently?
Well, recently, I've been working through a backlog of stuff on my TBR pile that has not a lot of cohesion. So, I spent a lot of time this past year reading a 700-page history of Scotland because I'm going to Scotland actually a week from today. Oh, a week from
Exciting.
yesterday. Yeah. So that's very exciting. But I've also been reading nonfiction works about work itself and about the value of your work. And I read John Mark Comer's The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and I've been reading Cal Newport, Slow Productivity. I read a lot of nonfiction when I'm reading for myself because a lot of fiction I read is for, if somebody needs an endorsement, or if I'm reading something for work. I used to work on fiction quite a bit more at work. I don't anymore, but so a lot of my personal reading's been nonfiction. And I feel like I can accomplish more of those books faster because they're shorter and they don't take as much immersion. And I'm actually a very slow reader.
I
So I've
know,
been doing a lot of that
audiobooks.
sort of reading lately.
Yeah.
But I am bringing a book on my trip that I got quite a while ago but haven't started. And I really wanted to read it just because of the title. And it's called An Arsonist's Guide to Writers' Homes in New England,
Ooh,
which isn't that fascinating?
yeah.
And I don't actually know a whole lot about it. So I'm going to start it on my trip and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yes. So we've come to the end of our questions, I should say. But is there anything that you would like to add or um
Well, no, I don't know if there's anything specific to Michigan Notable Books or anything like that that I'd want to add, but I do want to reiterate if there are any writers watching this, all you'd have to do is keep going. Just keep going.
mhm,
Take good advice and discard the rest. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And find some people who are doing the same thing you are in a writers group or in an organization that's larger than a local writers group. There are a lot of them that are genre specific, and they can be really great sources of support and learning and networking and all the things that will be helpful down the road. So, like, you're writing alone, but that doesn't mean the whole thing's on your own.
right, right. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation to
Yeah.
me. It was wonderful. Sorry. Uh, but I'm not sure how to end. So
Oh,
I hope they can um what do you call it that out? Edit that out.
oh, well, you know what? This fits in perfectly. Maybe they don't edit it out because there's a lot of times when you don't know how to end a book. And maybe this is just one that kind of, maybe it doesn't wrap up completely.
There we
It just
go.
has
There
a
we
little bit
go.
of an open ending. What happens next? We'll never know.
Well, I can't wait to read your next book. So,
Oh, thank you very much.
and I hope you have a great trip in Scotland.
Thank you
So,
so much. I appreciate it. And this was a great conversation. So thank you.
thank you.